Testing, testing. It seems we're ready. Okay, tonight's story is The Screwfly Solution by Raccoona Sheldon. Our guests today are some creepy crawly insects and dark woods and some scenes from horror movies. I really have to find a better gimmick. The young man, sitting at 2 degrees north, 75 degrees west, sent a casually venomous glance up at the non-fictional shoe-fly ventilador and went on reading his letter. He was sweating heavily, stripped to his shorts in the hot box of what passed for a hotel in Cuyapan. How do other wives do it? I stay busy with the Ann Arbor Grant Review programs and the seminar, saying brightly, "Oh yes, Alan is in Columbia, setting up a biological pest control program. Isn't that wonderful?" But inside I imagine you being surrounded by 19-year-old raven-haired cooing beauties, everyone panting with social dedication and filthy rich, and 40 inches of bosom busting out of her delicate lingerie. I even figured it in centimeters. That's 101.6 centimeters of busting. Oh, darling, darling, do what you want, only come home safe. Alan grinned fondly, briefly imagining the only body he longed for, his girl, his magic Anne. When he got up to open the window, another cautious notch. A long, pale, mournful face looked in. A goat. The room opened on the goat pen. The stench was vile. Air, anyway. He picked up the letter. Everything is just about as you left it, except that the Peadsville horror seems to be getting worse. They're calling it the Sons of Adam cult now. Why can't they do something, even if it is a religion? The Red Cross has set up a refugee camp in Ashton, Georgia. Imagine, refugees in the USA. I heard 2 little girls were carried out all slashed up. Oh, Alan. Which reminds me, Barney came over with a wad of clippings he wants me to send you. I'm putting them in a separate envelope. I know what happens to very fat letters and foreign POs. He says, in case you don't get them, what do the following have in common? Peadsville, Sao Paulo, Phoenix, San Diego, Shanghai, New Delhi, Tripoli, Brisbane, Johannesburg, and Lubbock, Texas. He says the hint is, remember where the intertropical convergence zone is now. That makes no sense to me. Maybe it will be to your superior ecological brain. All I could see about the clippings was that they were fairly horrible accounts of murders or massacres of women. The worst was the New Delhi one, about rafts of female corpses in the river. The funniest, if you can call it that, was a Texas Army officer who shot his wife, 3 daughters, and his aunt because God told him to clean the place up. Barney, such an old dear. He's coming over Sunday to help me take off the downspout and see what's blocking it. He's dancing on air right now since you left. His spruce budworm moth anti-pheromone program finally paid off. You know, he tested over 2,000 compounds. Well, it seems that good old 2097 really works. When I asked him what it does, he just giggles. You know how shy he is with women. Anyway, it seems that a one-shot spray program will save the forests without harming a single other thing. Birds and people can eat it all day, he says. Well, sweetheart, that's about all the news, except Amy goes back to Chicago to school Sunday. The place will be a tomb. I'll miss her frightfully in spite of her being at the stage where I'm her worst enemy. The sullen, sexy subteens, Angie says. Amy sends love to her daddy. I send you my whole heart, all that words can't say. Your Anne. Alan put the letter safely in his note file and glanced over the rest of the thin packet of mail, refusing to let himself dream of home and Anne. Barney's fat envelope wasn't there. He threw himself on the rumpled bed, yanking off the light cord a minute before the town generator went off for the night. In the darkness of the last of places Barney had mentioned spread themselves around a misty globe that turned, troublingly, briefly, in his mind. Something. But then the memory of the hideously parasitized children he had worked with at the clinic that day took possession of his thoughts. He set himself to considering the data he must collect. Look for the vulnerable link in the behavioral chain. How often Barney, Dr. Barnard Braithwaite, had pounded it into his skull. Where was it? Where? In the morning he would start to work on bigger cane-fly cages. At that moment, 5,000 miles north, Anne was writing. Oh, darling, darling, your first 3 letters are here. They all came together. I knew you were writing. Forget what I said about swarthy Harrises. That was all a joke. My darling, I know, us. Those dreadful cane-fly larvae. Those poor little kids. If you weren't my husband, I'd think you were a saint or something. I do anyway. I have your letters pinned up all over the house. Makes me a lot less lonely. No real news here, except things feel kind of quiet and spooky. Barney and I got the downspout out. It was full of a big rotted horde of squirrel nuts. They must have been dropping them down the top. I'll put a wire over it. Don't worry, I'll use a ladder this time. Barney's in an odd, grim mood. He's taking his Sons of Adam thing very seriously. It seems he's going to be on the investigation committee if it ever gets off the ground. The weird part is that nobody seems to be doing anything, as if it's just too big. Selena Peters has been printing some acid comments, like, when one man kills his wife, you call it murder, but when enough do it, we call it a lifestyle. I think it's spreading, but nobody knows because the media hasn't been asked to downplay it. Because the media have been asked to downplay it. Barney says it's being viewed as a form of contagious hysteria. He insisted I send you this ghastly interview, printed on thin paper. It's not going to be published, of course. The quietness is worse, though. It's like something terrible was going on just out of sight. After reading Barney's thing, I called up Pauline in San Diego to make sure she was all right. She sounded funny, as if she wasn't saying everything. My own sister. Just after she said things were great, she suddenly asked if she could come stay here a while next month. I said come right away, but she wants to sell her house first. I wish she'd hurry. Oh, the car is fine now. It just needed its filter changed. I had to go out to Springfield to get one, but Eddie installed it for only $250. He's going to bankrupt his garage. In case you didn't guess, those places of Barney's were all about latitude 30 degrees north or south. The horse latitudes? When I said not exactly, he said, remember the equatorial convergence zone shifts in winter. And to add in Libya, Osaka, and a place I forget. Wait, Alice Springs in Australia. That was what this has to do with anything, I asked. He said, nothing, I hope. I'll leave it to you. Great brains like Barney can be weird. Oh, my dearest, here's all of me to all of you. Your letters make life possible. But don't feel you have to. I can tell how tired you must be. Just know we're together, always, everywhere. Your Anne. Oh, P.S. I had to open this to put Barney's thing in. It wasn't the secret police. Here it is, all of again, A. In the goat-infested room where Alan read this, rain was drumming on the roof. He put the letter to his nose to catch the faint perfume once more, and folded it away. Then he pulled out the yellow, flimsy Barney had sent and began to read, frowning. Peadsville Cult, Sons of Adam Special. Statement by Driver Sergeant Willard Muse, Globe Fork, Arkansas. We hit the roadblock about 80 miles west of Jacksonville. Major John Hines of Ashton was expecting us. He gave us an escort of 2 riot vehicles headed by Captain T. Parr. Major Hines appeared shocked to see that the NIH medical team included 2 women doctors. He warned us in the strongest terms of the danger. So Dr. Patsy Putnam, Urbana 3, the psychologist, decided to stay behind at the Army cordon. But Dr. Elaine Fay, Clinton, New Jersey, insisted on going with us, saying she has the epidemiologist. We drove behind one of the riot cars at 30 miles per hour for an hour without seeing anything unusual. There were 2 big signs saying, "Sons of Adam, Liberated Zone." We passed some small pecan packing plants and a citrus processing plant. The men there looked at us, but did not do anything unusual. I didn't see any children or women, of course. Just outside Peadsville, we stopped at a big barrier made of oil drums in front of a large citrus warehouse. This area is old, sort of a shanty town and trailer park. The new part of town, with the shopping center and developments, is about an hour further on. A warehouse worker with a shotgun came out and told us to wait for the mayor. I don't think he saw Dr. Eileen Fay then. She was sitting sort of bent down in the back. Mayor Blount drove up in a police cruiser, and our chief, Dr. Premack, explained our mission from the Surgeon General. Dr. Premack was very careful not to make any remarks insulting to the mayor's religion. Mayor Blount agreed to let the party go on into Peadsville to take samples of the soil and water, and so on, and talk to the doctor who lives there. The mayor was about 6'2", weighed maybe 230, 240, tanned with grayish hair. He was smiling and chuckling in a friendly manner. Then he looked inside the car and saw Dr. Eileen Fay, and he blew up. He started yelling we had to all get the hell back, but Dr. Premack managed to talk him and cool him down, and finally the mayor said Dr. Fay should go into the warehouse office and stay there with the door closed. I had to stay there too and see that she didn't come out, and one of the mayor's men could drive the party. So the medical people and the mayor and one of the riot vehicles went on into Peadsville, and I took Dr. Fay back into the warehouse office and sat down. It was real hot and stuffy. Dr. Fay opened a window, but when I heard her trying to talk to an old man outside, I told her she couldn't do that and closed the window. The old man went away. Then she wanted to talk to me, but I told her I did not feel like conversing. I felt it was real wrong, her being there. So then, she started looking through the office files and reading papers. I told her that was a bad idea. She shouldn't do that. She said the government expected her to investigate. She showed me a booklet or a magazine they had there. It was called Man Listens to God by Reverend McKinley. They had a carton full in the office. I started reading it, and Dr. Fay said she wanted to wash her hands. So I took her back along a kind of enclosed hallway besides the conveyor to where the toilet was. There were no doors or windows, so I went back. After a while, she called out that there was a cot back there. She was going to lie down. I figured that was all right because of the no windows. Also, I was glad to be rid of her company. When I got to reading the book, it was very intriguing. It was very deep thinking about how man is now on trial with God, and if we fulfill our duty, God will bless us with real new life on earth. The signs and portents show it. It wasn't like, Sunday school stuff. It was deep. After a while, I heard some music. and saw the soldiers from the other riot car were across the street by the gas tanks, sitting in the shade of some trees and kidding with the workers from the plant. One of them was playing guitar. Not electric, just plain. It looked so peaceful. Then Mayor Blount drove up alone in the cruiser and came in. When he saw I was reading the book, he smiled at me sort of fatherly, but he looked tense. He asked me where Dr. Fay was, and I told him she was lying down in the back. He said that was okay. Then he kind of sighed and went back down the hall, closing the door behind him. I sat and listened to the guitar man, trying to hear what he was singing. I felt really hungry. My lunch was in Dr. Premack's car. After a while, the door opened and Mayor Blount came back in. He looked terrible. His clothes were messed up and he had bloody scrape marks on his face. He didn't say anything. He just looked at me, hard and fierce, like he might have been disoriented. I saw his zipper was open and there was blood on his clothing, and also on his private parts. I didn't feel frightened. I felt something important had happened. I tried to get him to sit down, but he motioned me to follow him back to the hall, to where Dr. Fay was. "You must see," he said. We went into the toilet, and I went into a kind of little room there where the cot was. The light was fairly good, reflected off the tin roof from where the walls stopped. I saw Dr. Fay lying on the cot in a peaceful appearance. She was lying straight. Her clothing was to some extent different, but her legs were together. I was glad to see that. Her blouse was pulled up, and I saw there was a cut or incision on her abdomen. The blood was coming out there, or it had been coming out there, like a mouth. It wasn't moving at this time. Also, her throat was cut open. I returned to the office. Mayor Blount was sitting down, looking very tired. He had cleaned himself off. He said, "I did it for you. Do you understand?" He seemed like my father. I can't say it better than that. I realized he was under a terrible strain. He had taken a lot of himself for me. He went on to explain how Dr. Fay was very dangerous. She was what they call a crypto-female, the most dangerous kind. He had exposed her and purified the situation. He was very straightforward. I didn't feel confused at all. I knew what he had done was right. We discussed the book, how man must purify himself and show God a clean world. He said some people raise the question of how can man reproduce without women, but such people miss the point. The point is that as long as man depends on the old filthy animal way, God won't help him. When man gets rid of his animal part, which is woman, this is the signal God is waiting. Then God will reveal the new, true, clean way. Maybe angels will come, bringing new souls. Or maybe we will live forever, but it is not our place to speculate, only obey. He said some men here had seen an angel of the Lord. He was very deep. It seemed like it echoed inside of me. It felt inspirational. Then the medical party drove up, and I told Dr. Premack that Dr. Fay had taken care of and sent away, and I got in the car and drove them out to the liberated zone. However, 4 of the 6 soldiers from the roadblock refused to leave. Captain Parr tried to argue them out of it, but finally agreed they could stay to guard the oil drum barrier. I would have liked to stay too. The place was peaceful, but they needed me to drive the car. If I had known there would be all this hassle, I never would have done them the favor. I'm not crazy, and I have not done anything wrong, and my lawyer will get me out, and that is all I have to say. In the Kayapa, the hot afternoon rain had temporarily ceased. As Alan's fingers let go of Sergeant Willard Mew's wretched document, he caught sight of pencil-scrawled words in the margin. Barney's spider hand. He squinted. Man's religion and metaphysics are the voices of his glands. Schwanweiser, 1878. Who the devil is Schwanweiser? Who the devil Schwanweiser was, Alan didn't know, but he knew that Barry was conveying. This murderous crackpot religion of Dr. McCusitz's was a symptom, not a cause. Barney believed something was physically affecting the Peedsville men, generating psychosis, and a local religious demagogue had sprung up to explain it. Well, maybe, but cause or effect, Alan thought of only one thing. 800 miles from Peedsville to Ann Arbor. Anne should be safe. She had to be safe. He threw himself on the lumpy cot, his mind going back exultantly to his work. At the cost of 1,000,000 bites and cane cuts, he was pretty sure he'd found the weak link in the canefly cycle. The male mass mating behavior, the comparative scarcity of ovulent females. It would be the Screwfly Solution all over again with the sexes reversed. Concentrate the pheromone, release sterilized females. Luckily, the breeding populations were comparatively isolated. In a couple of seasons, they ought to have it. Have to let them go on spraying poison meanwhile, of course. Damn petty. It was slaughtering everything and getting in the water, and the cane flies have evolved immunity anyway. But in a couple of seasons, maybe 3, they could drop the cane fly population below reproductive viability. No more tormented human bodies with those stinking larvae in the nasal passages and brain. He drifted off for a nap, grinning. Up north, Anne was biting her lip in shame and pain. Sweetheart, I shouldn't admit it, but your wife is a bit jittery. Just female nerves or something, nothing to worry about. Everything is normal up here. It's so eerily normal. Nothing in the papers, nothing anywhere, except what I hear through Barney and Lillian. But Pauline's phone won't answer out in San Diego. The 5th day some strange man yelled at me and banged the phone down. Maybe she's sold her house, but why wouldn't she call? Lillian's on some kind of Save the Women committee, like we were an endangered species. You know Lillian. It seems the Red Cross has started setting up camps. But she says, after the first rush, only a trickle are coming out to what they call the affected areas. Not many children either, even little boys. And they have some air photos around Lubbock showing that look like mass graves. Oh, Alan, so far it seems to be mostly spreading west, but something's happening to St. Louis. They're cut off. So many places seem to have just vanished from the news. I had a nightmare that there isn't a woman left alive down there. And nobody's doing anything. They talked about spraying with tranquilizers for a while, and then that died out. What could it do? Somebody at the UN had proposed a convention on, you won't believe this, femicide. It sounded like a deodorant spray. Excuse me, honey. I seem to be a little hysterical. George Serials came back from Georgia talking about God's will. Serials, the lifelong atheist. Helen, something crazy is happening. But there are no facts. Nothing. The Surgeon General issued a report on the bodies of the Rahway Rip Breast team. I guess I didn't tell you about that. Anyway, they couldn't find no pathology. Milton Baines wrote a letter saying, in the present state of the art, we can't distinguish the brain of a saint from the psychopathic killer. So how could they expect to find what they don't know how to look for? Well, enough of these jitters. It'll all be over by the time you get back. Just history. Everything's fine here. I fixed the car's muffler again, and Amy's coming home for the vacations. That'll get my mind off faraway problems. Oh, something amusing to end with. Angie told me what Barry's enzyme does to the spruce budworm. It seems to block the male from turning around after he connects with the female. So he mates with her head instead. Like clockwork with a cog missing. They're going to be some pretty puzzled female spruce worms. Now, why couldn't Barney tell me that? He really is such a sweet, shy old dear. He's given me some stuff to put on in, as usual. I didn't read it. Now don't worry, my darling. Everything's fine. I love you so. Always, always your Anne. 2 weeks later, in Kayapa, when Barney's enclosures slid out of the envelope, Alan didn't read them either. He stuffed them into the pocket of his bush jacket with a shaking hand and started bundling his notes together on the rickety table, with a scrawled note to Sister Dominique on top. Anne, my darling, the hell with the cane fly, the hell with everything except the tremor in his fearless girl's handwriting. Hell with being 5,000 miles away from his woman, his child, while some deadly madness raged. He crammed his meager belongings into his duffel. If he hurried, he could catch the bus through to Borgata and maybe make the Miami flight. In Miami, he found the planes north jammed. He failed a quick standby. 6 hours to wait. Time to call Anne. When the call got through some difficulty, he was unprepared for the rush of joy and relief that burst along the wires. Thank God! I can't believe it. Oh, Allie, my darling, are you really? I can't believe. He found he was repeating too, and all mixed up with the cane fly data. They were both laughing hysterically when he finally hung up. 6 hours. He settled into a frayed plastic chair opposite Aerolíneas Argentinas, his mind half back at the clinic, half on the throngs moving by him. Something was oddly different here, he perceived Presently, where was the decorative fauna he usually enjoyed in Miami? The parade of young girls in crotch-type pastel jeans, the flounces, boots, wild hats and hairdos, and startling expanses of newly tanned skin, the brilliant fabrics barely confining the bob of breasts and buttocks. Not here. But wait. Looking closely, he glimpsed two young faces hidden under unbecoming parkas, their bodies draped in bulky, nondescript skirts. In fact, all down the long vistas he could see the same thing. Hooded ponchos, heaped on clothes and baggy pants, dull colors. A new style? No, he thought not. It seemed to him their movements suggested furtiveness, timidity, and they moved in groups. He watched a lone girl struggle to catch up with others ahead of her, apparently strangers. They accepted her wordlessly. They're frightened, he thought, afraid of attracting notice. Even that gray-haired matron in pantsuit resolutely leading the flock of kids was glancing around nervously. And at the Argentine desk opposite, he saw another odd thing. Two lines had a big sign over them. Majors. Women. They were crowded with the shapeless forms and very quiet. The men seemed to be behaving normally, hurrying, lounging, griping and joking in the lines as they kicked their luggage along, but Alan felt an undercurrent of tension, like an irritant in the air. Outside the line of storefronts behind him, a few isolated men seemed to be handing out tracts. An airport attendant spoke to the nearest man. He merely shrugged and moved a few doors down. To distract himself, Alan picked up a Miami Herald from the next seat. It was surprisingly thin. The international news occupied him for a while. He had seen none for weeks. It, too, had a strange empty quality. Even the bad news seemed to have dried up. The African war, which had been going on, seemed to be over, or went unreported. A trade summit meeting was haggling over grain and steel prices. He found himself at the obituary pages, columns of close-set type dominated by a photo of an unknown defunct ex-senator. Then his eye fell on two announcements at the bottom of the page. One was too flowery for quick comprehension, but the other stated, in bold, plain type, "The Forset Funeral Home regrettably announces it will no longer accept female cadavers." Slowly, he folded the paper, staring at it numbly. On the back was an item headed Navigational Hazard Warning in the shipping news. Without really taking it in, he read, AP, Nassau. The excursion liner Carib Swallow reached port under tow today after striking an obstruction in the Gulf Stream off Cape Hatteras. The obstruction was identified as a part of a commercial trawler's scene floated by female corpses. This confirms reports from Florida and the Gulf of the use of such scenes, some of them over a mile in length. Similar reports coming from the Pacific coast and as far away as Japan indicate a growing hazard to coastwide shipping. Alan flung the thing in the trash receptacle and sat rubbing his forehead and eyes. Thank God he had followed his impulse to come home. He felt totally disoriented, as though he had landed by error on another planet. 4.5 hours more to wait. At length he recalled the stuff from Barney he had thrust in his pocket and pulled it out and smoothed it. The top item, however, seemed to be from Anne, or at least the Ann Arbor News. Dr. Lillian Dash, together with several hundred other members of her organization, had been arrested for demonstrating without permit in front of the White House. They seemed to have started a fire in an oil drum, which was considered particularly heinous. A number of women's groups had participated. The total struck Alan as more like thousands than hundreds. Extraordinary security precautions were being taken, despite the fact that the president was out of town at the time. The next item had to be Barney's, if Alan could recognize the old man's acerbic humor. UP, Vatican City, 19 June. Pope John IV today intimated that he does not plan to comment officially on the so-called Pauline purification cults advocating the elimination of women as a means of justifying man to God. A spokesman emphasized that the Church takes no position on these cults, but repudiates any doctrine involving a challenge to or from God to reveal his further plans for man. Cardinal Fazzoli, spokesman for the European Pauline movement, reaffirmed his view that scriptures define women as merely a temporary companion and instrument of man. Women, he states, are nowhere defined as human, but merely as transitional expedient or state. The time of transition to full humanity is at hand, he concluded. The next item appeared to be a thin paper Xerox from a recent issue of Science. Summary report of the Ad Hoc Emergency Committee of Femicide. The recent worldwide, though localized outbreaks of femicide appear to represent a recurrence of similar outbreaks by some group or sect which are not uncommon in world history in times of psychic stress. In this case, the root cause is undoubtedly the speed of social and technological change augmented by population pressure, and the spread and scope are aggravated by instantaneous world communication, thus exposing more susceptible persons. It is not viewed as medical or epidemiological problem. No physical pathology has been found. Rather, it is more akin to the various manias which swept Europe in the 17th century, e.g., the dancing manias, and like them, should run its course and disappear. The chiliastic cults which have sprung up around the affected areas appear to be unrelated, having in common only the idea that a new means of human reproduction will be revealed as a result of the purifying elimination of women. We recommend that 1. Inflammatory and sensational reporting be suspended. 2. Refugee centers be set up and maintained for women escapees from the focal areas. And 3. Containment of affected areas by military cordon be continued and enforced. And 4. After a cooling down period and the subsidence of the mania, qualified mental health teams and appropriate personnel go in to undertake rehabilitation. Summary of the Minority Report of the Ad Hoc Committee. The 9 members signing this report agree that there is no evidence for the epidemiological contagion of femicide in the strict sense. However, the geographical relation to the focal areas of outbreak strongly suggests that they cannot be dismissed as purely psychosocial phenomena. The initial outbreaks have occurred around the globe near the 30th parallel, the area of principal atmospheric downflow of upper winds coming from the intertropical convergence zone. An agent or condition in the upper equatorial atmosphere would thus be expected to reach ground level along the 30th parallel, with certain seasonal variations. One principal variation is that the downflow moves north over the East Asian continent during the late winter months, and these areas south of it, Arabia, Western India, parts of North Africa, have in fact been free of outbreaks until recently, when the downflow zone has moved south. A similar downflow occurred in the southern hemisphere, and outbreaks have been reported along the 30th parallel running through Pretoria and Alice Springs, Australia. Information from Argentina is currently unavailable. This geographical correlation cannot be dismissed, and is therefore urged that an intensified search for a physical cause be instituted. It is also urgently recommended that the rate of spread from known focal points be correlated with wind condition. A watch for similar outbreaks along the secondary town-dwelling zones at 60 degrees north and south should be kept. Signed, for the minority, Barnard Braithwaite. Alan grinned reminiscently at his old friend's name, which seemed to restore normalcy and stability in the world. It looked as if Barney was onto something too, despite the prevalence of horses' asses. He frowned, puzzling it out. Then his face slowly changed as he thought now how it would be, going home to Anne. In a few short hours his arms would be around her, the tall, secretly beautiful body that had come to obsess him. Theirs had been a late-blooming love. They'd married, he supposed now, out of friendship, even out of friends' pressure. Everyone said they were made for each other. He big and chunky and blonde, she willowy, brunette, both shy, highly controlled, cerebral types. For the first few years the friendship had held, but sex hadn't been all that much. Conventional necessity, politely reassuring each other, privately, he could say it now. Disappointing. But then, when Amy was a toddler, something had happened. A miraculous inner portal of sensuality had slowly opened to them. A liberation into their own secret, unsuspected heaven of fully physical bliss. Jesus, but it had been a wrench when the Columbia thing had come up. Only their absolute sureness of each other had made him take it, and now, to be about to have her again, trebly desirable from the spice of separation, feeling, seeing, hearing, smelling, grasping. He shifted in his seat to conceal his body's excitement, half mesmerized by fantasy. And Amy would be there too. He grinned at the memory of that prepubescent little body plastered against him. She was going to be a handful, all right. His manhood understood Amy a lot better than her mother did. No cerebral phase for Amy. But Anne, his exquisite shy one, with whom he'd found the way into almost unendurable transports of the flesh. First the conventional greeting, he thought, the news, the unspoken, savored, mounting excitement behind her eyes, the light touches, then the seeking of their own room, the falling clothes, the caresses, gentle at first, the flesh, the nakedness, the delicate teasing, the grasp, the first thrust. A terrible alarm bell went off in his head, exploding from his dream. He stared around, then finally down at his hands. What was he doing with his open-clasped knife in his fist? Stunned, he felt for the last shreds of his fantasy, and realized the tactile images had not been of caress, but of a frail neck strangling in his fist. The thrust had been the plunge of a blade seeking vitals, and his arms, legs, Phantasms of striking and trampling, bones cracking, and Amy. Oh God, oh God. Not sex, bloodlust. That was what he had been dreaming. The sex was there, but it was driving some engine of death. Numbly, he put the knife away, thinking it only over and over. It's got me. It's got me. Whatever it is, it's got me. I can't go home. After an unknown time, he got up and made his way to the United counter to turn in his ticket. The line was long. As he waited, his mind cleared a little. What could he do here in Miami? Wouldn't it be better to get back to Ann Arbor and turn himself in to Barney? Barney could help him, if anyone could. Yes, that was best. But first he had to warn Anne. The connection took even longer this time. When Anne finally answered, he found himself blurting unintelligibly. It took a while to make her understand he wasn't talking about the plane delay. I tell you I've caught it. Listen, Anne, for God's sake, if I should come home to the house, don't let me come near you. I mean it. I'm going to the lab, but I might lose control and try to get you. Is Barney there? Yes, but darling, listen, maybe he can fix me. Maybe this will wear off. But I'm not safe, Anne. Anne, I'd kill you. Can you understand? Get a weapon. I'll try not to come to the home, but if I do, don't let me get near you. Or Amy. It's a sickness. It's real. Treat me like a fucking wild animal, Anne. Say you understand. Say you'll do it. They were both crying when he hung up. He went, shaking, back to sit and wait. After a time, his head seemed to clear a little more. Doctor, try and think. The first thing he thought was to take the loathsome knife and throw it down the trash slot. As he did so, he realized there was one more piece of Barney's material in his pocket. He uncrumpled it. It seemed to be a clipping from nature. At the top was Barney's scrawl. Only guy making sense. UK infected now. Oslo, Copenhagen out of communication. Damfoots won't listen. Stay put. Communication from Professor Ian McIntyre, Glasgow University. A potential difficulty for our species has always been implicitly in the close linkage between the behavioral expression of aggression, predation, and sexual reproduction in the male. This close linkage involves A. Many of the same neuromuscular pathways which are both utilized in predatory and sexual pursuit, grasping, mounting, etc., and B. Similar states of adrenal arousal which are activated in both. The same linkage is seen in the males of many other species. In some, the expression of aggression and copulation alternate or even coexist. An all too familiar example being the common house cat. Males of many species bite, claw, bruise, tread, and otherwise assault receptive females during the act of intercourse. Indeed, in some species, the male attack is necessary for female ovulation to occur. In many, if not all species, it is the aggressive behavior which appears first, and then changes to copulatory behavior when the appropriate signal is presented. E.g., the three-tined sickleback and the European robin. Lacking the inhibiting signal, the male's fighting response continues, and the female is attacked or driven off. It seems therefore appropriate to speculate that the present crisis might be caused by some substance, perhaps at the viral or enzymatic level, which affects a failure of switching or triggering function in the higher primates. Note, zoo gorillas and chimpanzees have recently been observed to attack or destroy their mates. Rhesus not. Such a dysfunction could be expressed by the failure of mating behavior to modify or supervene over the aggressive predatory response, i.e., sexual stimulation would produce attack only. The stimulation discharged itself through the destruction of the stimulating object. In this connection, it might be noted that exactly this condition is a commonplace of the male functional pathology, in those cases where murder occurs as a response and apparent completion of sexual desire. It should be emphasized that the aggression-copulation linkage discussed here is specific to the male. The female response, e.g. lordotic reflex, being of a different nature. Alan sat holding the crumpled sheet a long time. The dry, stilted Scottish phrases seemed to help clear his head, despite the sense of brooding tension all around him. Well, if pollution or whatever had produced some substance, it could presumably be countered, filtered, neutralized. Very, very carefully, he let himself consider his life with Anne, his sexuality. Yes, much of their love play could be viewed as genitalized, sexually gentled savagery, play predation. He turned his mind quickly away. Some writer's phrase occurred to him. The panic element is all sex. Who? Fritz Lieber? The violation of social distance, maybe? Another threatening element? Whatever. It's our weak link, he thought. Our vulnerability. The dreadful feeling of rightness he had experienced when he found himself, knife in hand, fantasizing violence, came back to him. As though it was the right, the only way. Was that what Barney's budworms felt when they mated with their females wrong? And too? At length, he became aware of body need and sought a toilet. The place was empty, except for what he took to be a heap of clothes blocking the door of the far stall. Then he saw the red-brown pool in which it lay, and the bluish mounds of bare, thin buttocks. He backed out, not breathing, and fled to the nearest crowd, knowing he was not the first to have done so. Of course, any sexual drive. Boys, men too. At the next washroom, he watched to see men enter and leave normally before he ventured in. Afterward, he returned to sit, waiting, repeating over and over to himself, "Go to the lab, don't go home, go straight to the lab, don't go home, go straight to the lab, don't go home." 3 more hours. He sat numbly at 26 degrees north, 81 degrees west, breathing, breathing. Dear Diary, big scene tonight. Daddy came home. Only he acted so funny. He had the taxi wait and just held onto the doorway. He wouldn't touch me or let us come near him. I mean funny weird, not funny ha-ha. He said, "I have something to tell you. This is getting worse, not better. I'm going to sleep in the lab, but I want you to get out. Anne, I can't trust myself anymore. First thing in the morning, both of you get on the plane for Martha's and stay there." So I thought he had to be joking. I mean, with the dance next week, and Aunt Martha lives in Whitehorse, and there's nothing. So I was yelling, and Mom was yelling, and Dad was groaning, "Go now!" And then he started crying. So I realized, wow, this is serious. And I started to go over to him, but Mom yanked me back, and then I saw she had this big knife, and she shoved me in the back of her and started crying too. Oh, Alan, like she was insane. So I said, "Daddy, I'll never leave you." It felt like the perfect thing to say, and it was thrilling. He looked at me real sad and deep like I was a grown-up, while Mother was treating me like I was a mere infant as usual. Mother ruined it, raving, "Alan, the child is mad. Darling, go." So she ran out the door yelling, "Be gone, take the car, get out of here before I come back." Oh, I forgot to say I was wearing what but my gooby green and my curlities still on. Wouldn't you know, of all the shitty luck, how could I have known such a beautiful scene was ahead? We never know life's cruel whimsy. And Mother is dragging out suitcases, yelling, "Pack your things, hurry." So she's going, I guess, but I'm not. I repeat, I am not going to spend the fall sitting in Aunt Martha's grain silo and lose the dance and all my summer credits. And Daddy was trying to communicate with us, right? I think the relationship is obsolete. So when she goes upstairs, I'm splitting. I'm going to go over to the lab and see Daddy. Oh, P.S. Diane tore my yellow jeans. She promised me I could use her pink ones. That'll be the day. I ripped that page out of Anne's diary when I heard the squad car come in. I'd never opened her diary before, but when I found she's gone, I looked. Oh, my darling little girl, she went to him. My little girl, my poor fool child. Maybe if I'd taken time to explain, maybe. Excuse me, Barney. The stuff is wearing off. The shots they gave me. I didn't feel anything. I mean, I knew somebody's daughter went to see her father and he killed her and cut his throat. But it didn't mean anything. Alan's note, they gave me that, but then they took it away. Why did they have to do that? His last handwriting, the last words he wrote before his hand picked up I remember it. Sudden and light as that, the bonds gave, and we learned of finalities besides the grave. The bonds of our humanity had given we are finished. I love. I'm all right, Barney. Really. Who wrote that? Robert Frost. The bonds gave. Oh, he said, tell Barney. The terrible rightness. What does that mean? You can't answer that, Barney dear. I'm just writing this to stay sane. I'll put it in your hidey hole. Thank you. Thank you, Barney dear. Even as blurry as I was, I knew it was you. All the time you were cutting off my hair and rubbing dirt on my face, I knew it was right because it was you. Barney, I never thought of you as those terrible words you said. You were always dear, Barney. By the time the stuff wore off, I had done everything you said. The gas, the groceries. Now I'm here in your cabin with these clothes you made me put on. I guess I do look like a boy. The gas man called me Mister. I still can't really realize. I have to stop myself from rushing back. But you saved my life, I know that. The first trip in, I got a paper. I saw where they bombed the Apostle Islands refuge, and it had about those 3 women stealing the Air Force plane and bombing Dallas too. Of course they shot them down over the Gulf. Isn't it strange how we do nothing? Just get killed by ones and twos? Or more, now they've started on the refuges. Like hypnotized rabbits, we're a toothless race. Do you know I never said we, meaning women before? We was always me and Alan, and Amy, of course. Being killed selectively encourages group identification. You see how sane-headed I am? But I still can't really realize. My first trip in was for salt and kerosene. I went to that little Red Deer store and I got my stuff from the old man in the back. As you told me, you see, I remembered. He called me boy, but I think he suspects. He knows I'm staying in your cabin. Anyway, some men and boys came in the front. They were all so normal, laughing and kidding. I just couldn't believe Barney. In fact, I started to go out past them when I heard one of them say, Heinz saw an angel. An angel. So I stopped and listened. They said it was big and sparkly. Come in to see if man is carrying out God's will, one of them said. And he said, Moosonee is now a liberated zone, and all up Hudson Bay. I turned and got out the back fast. The old man had heard them too. He said to me quietly, I'll miss the kids. Hudson Bay, Barney. That means it's coming from the north too, doesn't it? That must be about 60 degrees. But I have to go back once again to get some fish hooks. I can't live on bread. Last week I found a deer some poacher had killed. Just the head and legs. I made a stew. It was dough. Her eyes. I wonder if mine look like that now. I went to get the fish hooks today. It was bad. I can't ever go back. There were some men in the front again, but they were different. Mean and tense. No boys. And there was a news sign out front. I couldn't see it. Maybe it says Liberated Zone, too. The old man gave me the hooks quick and whispered to me, "Boy, them woods will be full of hunters next week." I almost ran out. About a mile down the road, a blue pickup started to chase me. I guess he wasn't from around here. I ran the VW into a logging draw, and he roared on by. After a long while, I drove out and came on back, but I left the car about a mile from here and hiked in. It's surprising how hard it is to pile through the brush to hide a It's surprising how hard it is to pile enough brush to hide a yellow VW. Barney, I can't stay here. I'm eating perch raw so nobody will see my smoke, but those hunters will be coming through. I'm going to move my sleeping bag out to the swamp by the big rock. I don't think many people go there. Since the last lines I moved out, it feels safer. Oh, Barney, how did this happen? Fast, that's how. 6 months ago, I was Dr. Ann Alstein. Now I'm a widow and a bereaved mother, dirty and hungry, squatting in the swamp in mortal fear. Funny, if I'm the last woman left on earth. I guess the last one around here anyway. Maybe some hold out in the Himalayas or sneaking through the wreck of New York City. How can we last? We can't. And I can't survive the winter here, Barney. It gets to 40 degrees below. I'll have to have a fire, and they'll see the smoke. Even if I worked my way south, the woods end in a couple 100 miles. I'd be potted like a duck. No use. Maybe somebody is trying something somewhere, but it won't reach me in time. And what do I have to live for? No, I'll just make a good end. Stay up on that rock where I can see the stars. After I go back and leave this for you, I'll wait and see the beautiful color in the trees one last time. I know what I'll scratch for an epitaph. Here lies the second meanest primate on earth. Goodbye, dearest Barney. I guess nobody will ever read this unless I get the nerve and energy to take it to Barney's. Probably I won't. Leave it in a baggie. I have one here. Maybe Barney will come and look. I'm up on the big rock now. The moon is going to rise soon. I'll do it then. Mosquitoes, be patient. You'll have all you want. The thing I have to write down is that I saw an angel too, this morning. It was big and sparkly, like the man said, like a Christmas tree without the lights. But I knew it was real because the frogs stopped croaking and 2 blue jays gave alarm calls. That's important. It was really there. I watched it, sitting under my rock. It didn't move much. It sort of bent over and picked up something, leaves or twigs. I couldn't see. Then it did something with them around its middle, like putting them into an invisible sample pocket. Let me repeat. It was there, Barney. If you're reading this, there are things here. And I think they've done whatever it is to us, made us kill ourselves off. Why? Well, because this planet is a nice place, if it wasn't for the people. How do you get rid of people? Bombs? Death rays? All very primitive. They leave a big mess, destroy everything. There's craters, radioactivity. It ruins the place. This way, there's no fuss. Just like what we did with the Screwfly. You pinpoint the weak link, wait a bit while we do it for them. Only a few bones around, and those make good fertilizer. Barney dear, goodbye. I saw it. It was there. But it wasn't an angel. I think what I saw was the real estate agent. The end.